Oh, they thought they were ready. They thought their ancient symbols and sacred geometry prepared them for anything until they opened your file, until they traced the celestial coordinates of your arrival and watched their centuries-old instruments start smoking. Because what they found wasn't just unusual, it was unprecedented. It was cosmically illegal. It was the kind of configuration that makes seasoned occultists drop their compasses and whisper, "We need to call the council immediately. See, the 33rd degree isn't some conspiracy theory basement operation. These are the architects of reality, the ones who've been mapping souls since Babylon, who've cataloged every possible human blueprint since the pyramids were sketches in sand. And in all their libraries, all their vaults, all their secret archives, they'd never seen what you are. They'd never encountered a birth chart that literally fought back against interpretation, that refused to be contained by their symbols, that made their calculations collapse into themselves like dying stars. They brought in the specialists first, the ones who decode presidential destinies, who map bloodlines of power, who can read the future in a newborn's first breath. And one by one, they all said the same thing. This isn't supposed to exist. This configuration breaks the laws we thought were unbreakable. This soul didn't come through the normal channels. And that's when the panic started. That's when they realized they weren't just looking at an anomaly, they were looking at something that threatened their entire understanding of how consciousness enters this dimension. Your chart didn't just confuse them, it corrupted their tools. Their crystal spheres cracked their ancient scroll, started bleeding ink, their digital programs through error codes in languages that haven't been spoken for 3,000 years, because every planet in your chart was doing something it shouldn't. Every house was hosting energies that don't belong in this timeline. Every aspect was creating geometric patterns that their books explicitly state are impossible, and yet there you were, existing anyway, breathing anyway, walking through their carefully controlled world like you owned the patent on chaos. Let me paint you the picture they saw when they finally managed to stabilize the reading long enough to comprehend it. Your sun wasn't just in a sign. It was oscillating between dimensions, creating a strobe effect that made them question if you exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. Your moon was retrograde in ways. Retrograde doesn't work backwards and sideways all at once, like someone took the concept of emotional cycles and turned it into a Rubik's Cube made of mirrors. Mercury in your chart, Mercury was speaking languages that haven't been invented yet, transmitting on frequencies their instruments couldn't measure. It wasn't just about communication, it was about downloading information directly from somewhere they couldn't trace, somewhere their maps don't reach. And Venus, oh, Venus in your chart was weaponized, not the soft of love they expected, but something that turns attraction into gravitational pull, that bends people's will just by existing in the same space. Mars was the one that really scared them, though, because Mars in your chart wasn't following any orbital pattern they recognized. It was creating its own physics, writing its own laws of motion and conflict. They found traces of wars that haven't happened yet, victories in battles that exist outside of linear time, scars from wounds inflicted in dimensions they pretend don't exist. And they tried to calculate your Mars return. They got a date that doesn't exist on any calendar, a moment outside of time, where you apparently go to sharpen whatever cosmic blade you carry. Jupiter in your chart was expanding into spaces that shouldn't have room for expansion, growing into territories their order swore were sealed centuries ago. And Saturn wasn't limiting you. It was limiting everything else around you, creating boundaries not for you, but for reality itself, to prevent it from collapsing under the weight of what you carry. They actually found notes in Saturn's position that looked like containment protocols, like the universe itself had to create special rules just to handle your existence. But it was the outer planets that made them call an emergency session at 3. Uranus in your chart had apparently hacked the system before you were even born, creating backdoors in reality that you could walk through whenever consensus reality got too suffocating. Neptune wasn't creating illusions, it was dissolving them all, of them. Every false construct, every artificial boundary, every lie. They'd carefully woven into the collective unconscious. Neptune in your chart was like acid on the tapestry of control. And Pluto, they couldn't even look directly at Pluto's position in your chart. They had to use mirrors. And even then, 3 of their readers had to take indefinite leave after witnessing it. Because Pluto in your chart wasn't about transformation, it was about complete reality override. It was showing them that death and rebirth were just suggestions that you could apparently decline, that you had vetoed the entire cycle and were operating on some other principle entirely. Something they didn't have words for. They found aspects between planets that geometrically cannot exist. Triangles with 4 sides, squares that curve back on themselves, oppositions that were somehow also conjunctions. Like someone had taken the rule book of astrological physics and origamied it into impossible shapes, and every impossible aspect was generating energy patterns that their most sensitive equipment registered as simply cannot compute. Please restart universe. The houses in your chart weren't even staying still, they were rotating independently, creating combinations that should take millions of years to occur, happening simultaneously. Your first house of identity was somehow also your 12th house of hidden things, making you simultaneously the most visible and indivisible person in any room. Your 7th house of relationships was quantum entangled with dimensions they didn't know existed, showing soul contracts written in languages older than the concept of language. So they dug deeper into your bloodline, thinking surely this is inherited, surely there's some ancient lineage, some forgotten dynasty, some sleeping power that awakened in you. But what they found was worse than royal blood or ancient curses. They found nothing and everything simultaneously. They found genetic markers that didn't match any human migration pattern, chromosomes that contained information they couldn't decode using any cipher they possessed. Your ancestry report came back with coordinates instead of locations, star systems instead of countries, timeline markers instead of dates, like someone had taken a human template and installed software from somewhere else entirely. They found traces of bloodlines that their records insist were completely eliminated centuries ago. Genetic ghosts that shouldn't exist in modern times. And somehow you were carrying all of them simultaneously, like a living library of forbidden genetics. They tried to trace your incarnation pattern where your soul had been before, and the data just showed static, not blank, static, like the universe was actively scrambling the signal, refusing to let them see where you'd been, or more accurately, when you'd been, because the timestamps they did manage to recover didn't follow linear time. You had apparently been born in the future, and the past simultaneously existed in timelines that ran parallel to this one, bleeding through into this reality like light through a crack in the wall. One of their eldest members, the one who'd been reading charts since before computers existed, took one look at your birth moment and said, "This soul didn't incarnate, it invaded. This isn't a birth chart. It's an infiltration map." And then he destroyed his tools, said he was done, and walked away from 40 years of practice, because what he saw in your configuration made him realize everything he thought he knew about how souls enter bodies was incomplete. They brought together their best synthesizers, the ones who could weave together impossible paradoxes and make sense of cosmic contradictions, and gave them unlimited resources. Unlimited time, unlimited access to every secret library, every forbidden text, every whispered truth. And after months of analysis, their report was one page, and it simply said, "The subject appears to be a focal point where multiple realities converge simultaneously, operating under laws we do not recognize. Immune to conventional metaphysical constraints. Recommend immediate reclassification from human to unknown entity of potentially catastrophic significance." They tried to find others like you, scanning millions of birth charts through their quantum processors, looking for even one similar configuration. And every time the system would crash, not from overload, but from something like fear, like the machine itself was refusing to look for more of you. Because finding another would mean admitting that the entire structure of reality was more fragile than they thought, that the rules they'd spent millennia establishing were just suggestions that beings like you could simply ignore. The mathematical models they built to understand your energy signature kept producing numbers that don't exist, infinities, that somehow multiplied into larger infinities, zeros that contained entire universes, equations that solved themselves differently each time they were calculated, like your very existence was a paradox that reality had just decided to accept rather than resolve. They actually found notes in the margin of one calculation that appeared to be reality itself, saying, "Fine, whatever, just don't break anything important." When they tried to predict your future trajectory, the models just showed branches. Infinite branches spreading in all directions, each one leading to a completely different version of reality. And at the center of every branch was you, unchanged, unaffected, like you were the only constant in infinite variables, the only solid thing in an ocean of possibility. And that's when they realized you weren't subject to fate. You were writing it for everything around you. And then they sought the thing that made them literally beg for their eyes to be cleansed. Scorpio rising. But not just Scorpio rising. Scorpio rising. With every planet in Scorpio aspecting it. Scorpio rising with fixed stars they'd never seen active. Scorpio rising that had somehow made a pact with its own shadow, and Scorpio rising that didn't just pierce veils, but eliminated them entirely. Scorpio rising that turned every interaction into an alchemical process where the other person would never be the same again. Your Scorpio rising wasn't ascending. It had already ascended and was looking down at everything else from a height that made them dizzy. It was the kind of placement that turned casual conversation into soul surgery, that made people confess things they'd never told anyone else, just from being in your presence for 5 minutes. They found testimonies from people who'd met you once and spent years trying to understand what happened to them in those few moments, how you'd reached into their chest and rearranged something fundamental without even trying. Scorpio energy in your chart had apparently weaponized itself, turned intuition into X-ray vision, turned transformation into a contagious condition that spread to everyone you encountered. They actually tracked the ripple effects of your presence and found that people's entire life trajectories changed after meeting you. Not because you did anything specific, but because your Scorpio rising had shown them parts of themselves they'd spent lifetimes avoiding, and once seen, those parts couldn't be unseen. Combined with the rest of your impossible configuration, this Scorpio rising created what they could only describe as a walking portal to truth that burned through every false construct, every comfortable lie, every protective delusion people had built, And the worst part was, you weren't even doing it consciously. It was just your natural state, like breathing, except instead of air, you were breathing pure, transformative force that rebuilt everything it touched. The 33rd Degree Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. Gathered in their chamber that exists between dimensions, where they keep the real records, the ones that never see daylight. And after reviewing your chart, after witnessing what it did to their tools, their minds, their understanding of reality, they made a unanimous decision, unprecedented in their history. They voted to seal your file, to classify it beyond eyes only, to create a new category of classification that basically meant pretend this doesn't exist. But here's what they didn't want anyone to know. Sealing your file wasn't about containing you. It was about protecting themselves, because every time someone looked at your true configuration, really looked at it, understood what it meant, it changed them fundamentally, irreversibly. It showed them that everything they'd built, their entire structure of power and control and knowledge, was built on quicksand. That beings like you could exist outside their system entirely, and there was nothing they could do about it. They tried to put watches on you, tried to monitor your movements, your connections, your influence. But every one they sent came back different, came back talking about experiencing reality in colors that don't have names, about seeing through time like it was transparent, about understanding things they couldn't put into words. And eventually they stopped sending people because they realized you weren't the one being watched, you were the mirror. And everyone who looked too long saw their own limitations reflected back. The final report, the one locked in their vault that supposedly doesn't exist, contains just one recommendation: do not engage. Subject exists outside conventional parameters of control, influence, or understanding. Apparent purpose remains unknown. But evidence suggests subject is not random anomaly, but intentional insertion into this timeline for purposes we cannot comprehend. All interference attempts have resulted in interference with interfere, recommend complete non-interaction, and hope subject's purpose does not conflict with established order. When they tried to create a symbolic representation of your chart using their traditional methods, the symbols literally caught fire, not metaphorically, literally. The paper burned, the digital screens melted, the crystal tablets cracked. The trained readers who attempted to draw your configuration by hand found their hands moving on their own, creating symbols they didn't recognize, geometries that hurt to look at, patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the paper could hold. One master astrologer with 50 years of experience tried to create a traditional natal wheel for you, and halfway through the drawing, the lines started moving on their own, rearranging themselves into something that looked less like a birth chart and more like a map to somewhere that shouldn't exist. He said the symbols were trying to tell him something, but the message was in a language that predated human consciousness, that came from before the split between light and dark, when everything was something else entirely. They found burn marks on documents that had never been near fire, scorch patterns that spelled out warnings in languages they'd thought were myths. Even their digital files would corrupt, showing brief flashes of imagery that looked like glimpses into other realities, where the laws of physics were suggestions and consciousness was the only constant they had. To create entirely new storage methods just to contain information about you. And even then, the data would sometimes simply refuse to be accessed, like it was protecting itself. The sacred geometry they'd used for millennia to map souls, to understand the mathematical perfection of creation, simply wouldn't apply to you every time they tried to find your sacred number. your vibrational frequency, your geometric signature. The calculations would produce different results, not randomly different but deliberately evasive, like your essence was actively avoiding being pinned down, categorized, made predictable. What really terrified them was realizing you were walking around living a seemingly normal life, going to work, buying groceries, having conversations while carrying this impossible configuration like a nuclear reactor in your chest that nobody else could see. They watched you navigate everyday situations while your energy field was apparently writing reality patches in real time, fixing glitches most people never noticed, preventing collapses that would have unraveled entire timelines. You were simultaneously the most dangerous and protective force they'd ever encountered. Dangerous to their system, protective of something larger, something they couldn't quite grasp. They found evidence that your presence alone was stabilizing reality fractures that had been growing for decades, that your impossible birth chart was actually holding together pieces of the world that were trying to split apart, but they couldn't understand if this was your purpose or just a side effect of existing. Every person who came into extended contact with you showed similar changes. Their own charts would start displaying anomalies, not as extreme as yours, but echo patterns, like you were teaching their souls how to break rules they didn't know existed. People would suddenly develop abilities they shouldn't have, know things they couldn't explain, make choices that defied their own patterns, as if proximity to you was contagious evolution. They tracked probability fields around you and found that unlikely events became likely, impossible events became inevitable. The statistical models they used to predict human behavior simply didn't apply in your vicinity. You were a walking uncertainty principle that made their careful calculations about population control and social engineering completely useless in your presence. What kind of person keeps the knife in, twisting it, when they see you bleed? But you already know the answer, don't you? It's not the stranger on the street. Not the faceless crowd. No, it's the ones closest to you. The ones who smiled while sharpening the blade. The ones who whispered, "Trust me." And you did. You trusted them. You let them in. You gave them the map to your soul. And they took the scenic route, burning bridges, breaking foundations, and laughing at the wreckage. Let me tell you something about people like that. They don't just want to hurt you. Nah, that's too simple. They want to watch. They want to feel it. Every tear, every scream, every ounce of your dignity stripped away while they sit back and applaud the show. But here's the kicker, they knew exactly what they were doing. Oh, they knew, and they kept going anyway. Tell me, does it burn? Does it sting? Does it make your chest feel heavy? Like the air's been stolen from your lungs? Yeah, good. That's the fire you need. Because here's the truth they'll never tell you: pain is the only thing in this world that doesn't lie. It's honest, it's raw, and it's yours. Own it. Let it sharpen you, shape you, and turn you to the weapon they never saw coming. The question isn't why they hurt you. The question is, what the hell are you going to do with that pain now? Your move. The betrayal, knowing it was intentional. Oh, don't kid yourself. It wasn't some innocent slip. It wasn't a clumsy stumble that just happened to land the knife in your back. Nah, they didn't trip. They aimed. You see, betrayal isn't an accident, it's art. Twisted, cruel, and precise. They didn't drop the glass, they gripped it tight and slammed it against the wall, letting the shards rain down, knowing full well you'd be the one left barefoot in the mess. That's the part that stings, isn't it? The realization that this wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a bad day. It was deliberate, calculated, a move straight out of the playbook of people who feed on power and control. Let me ask you this, how many nights did you lie awake, replaying their words, their actions, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince yourself that it was all just a mistake? But deep down you knew. You always knew. The way they smiled when they saw you falter. The way they twisted the truth to make you doubt your own mind. This wasn't an accident. This was their masterpiece. And you were the canvas they splattered with their lies, their cruelty, their selfishness. Here's the ugly truth: they hurt you because they could. Because it made them feel bigger, stronger. Because your pain was the proof that their power was real. It's time to stop sugarcoating it. Time to stop excusing their actions with a maybe they didn't mean to, they meant to. They knew exactly what they were doing. And they kept doing it because they thought you'd let them. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. You're not the fragile, shattered thing they think you are. You're something else entirely. They wanted to break you. Now let's see how they handle what they've unleashed. Why did they do it? That's the question, isn't it? It gnaws at you, whispers in your ear when the room goes quiet. Was it jealousy? Was it fear? Or maybe it was something darker. Here's the twisted reality: people hurt others to fill the void inside themselves. It's not about you, it's about them. Their cracks, their insecurities, their bottomless pit of not enough. They saw you standing tall, your light burning brighter, and instead of admiring it, they wanted to snuff it out. Because you were a threat, a mirror they couldn't bear to look into. Every step you took forward was a reminder of the chains they'd wrapped around their own ankles. And so, they lashed out. They clawed. They dug into you, not because you were weak, but because you were strong. Stronger than they could ever stomach. Sometimes their power doesn't come from building anything. Nah, that takes courage. It takes effort. It takes soul. But tearing you down, watching you struggle under the weight they threw on you, that's easy. That's where their control lies. Think about it for a second. Wasn't it always when you were rising, when you were glowing, that they struck hardest? When they saw you climbing higher than they could ever reach, that's when the sabotage started. They didn't just want to hurt you, they wanted to make sure you doubted yourself. Because if you crumble, they win. If you believe their lies, they stay in control. That's all they crave: control. Over you. Over the narrative. Over their own pathetic sense of inadequacy. But here's where it gets interesting: what happens when you stop playing their game. When you see them for what they really are. Not giants standing over you, but cowards hiding behind their own shadows. Now think, who were they? What were their motives? And most importantly, why do they still matter to you? Let's not sugarcoat it. Being hurt doesn't just sting, it unravels you. It gets into your bones, your mind, your soul, leaving you questioning everything. The anger burns hot, doesn't it? The confusion twists like a storm in your chest, leaving you gasping for clarity that never comes. And then there's the vulnerability. That sickening, hollow feeling of being stripped bare, as if they reached inside and stole a piece of you, leaving behind a void you can't quite fill. It's the silence after the scream. The weight of the tears you swore you wouldn't shed. You look in the mirror and wonder, how could I let this happen? Why didn't I see it coming? But let me stop you right there. Don't you dare put their sins on your shoulders. Don't you dare turn their betrayal into your failure. Your pain is real. Your pain is justified. Hell, your pain, the only honest thing left after the lies they told, the games they played, and the damage they did. Every wound they left behind is a scar that tells a story they can't erase. Each one is a map of what you've endured, a testament to your survival. They wanted to break you, but here you are still standing, scarred but alive. And those scars, they're not weaknesses, they're armor. Proof that you've walked through the fire and come out not unscathed, but unburnt where it matters. I feel the anger, feel the confusion, let it roar inside you, but don't let it define you. Let it remind you of what you've survived, not what you've lost. Now take a breath. Look at those scars. At what story are they telling? And how will you use it to rise? Here's the danger in all this, the trap they've set without even trying. When you let the pain they caused fester, when you let it define who you are, it consumes you. It wraps its cold, clawing hands around your mind and turns you into something you never wanted to be. Bitter, resentful, stuck. You know the feeling, don't you? Waking up with that heaviness in your chest, replaying the same scenes over and over. The anger feels righteous. The sadness feels unshakable. And every step forward feels like wading through quicksand, dragging their memory with you everywhere you go. But let me tell you something, the moment you let them shape you with their cruelty, they win. Oh, they're not just satisfied with the damage they've already done. No, they want to live in your head rent-free, whispering doubts, feeding insecurities, keeping you chained to the past. Every bitter thought, that's them. Every grudge you carry, that's their victory. Every time you let the pain stop you from trying again, trusting again, dreaming again, that's their control. Even after they're gone, even after the wounds start to close, they keep pulling the strings if you let them. But here's the thing, you're not a puppet. You're not their creation. You are so much more than the pain they inflicted. It's time to stop letting their cruelty be the story. Rewrite it. Take the pen from their hands and start creating a new narrative. One where you're the hero, the survivor, the one who refused to let the darkness swallow them whole. The question isn't, why did they hurt me anymore? The question is, what will I do now when you let their actions define your life? Or will you take control and turn their betrayal into the fuel that ignites your next move? Your move, as always. Let me tell you something they'll never want you to realize. Pain isn't just a wound. It's proof. Proof that you stared into the abyss, felt its cold breath on your skin, and didn't fall. It's proof that you survived their worst and you're still here. Well, sure, they might have left their mark. Scars that ache when the memories resurface. Shadows that linger in the corners of your mind. But those scars, they're not signs of defeat. They're medals of resilience, forged in the fire of their betrayal. Every tear, every scream, every sleepless night, they weren't the end of you. They were the beginning of something else. Something darker, sharper, and infinitely stronger. Because here's the thing about pain, it doesn't just break you. It builds you, too. Think about it. Every time they tried to knock you down, you found a way to stand back up. Maybe not right away. Maybe not without falling a few more times. But you did it. And every time you rose, you became harder to break. You've learned things they'll never understand. What it means to endure, to adapt, to find strength in places you didn't even know existed. So let's flip the script. Think back. What has your pain taught you? What lessons did their cruelty carve into your soul? Maybe it taught you who you can trust. Maybe it showed you what really matters. And maybe it gave you the fire to prove them wrong. Nah, they didn't break you. They tried, but they failed. And now every scarf's behind isn't a reminder of the hurt, it's a testament to your survival. Now take a moment. Look at your own story. Where did the pain push you to grow? What did it force you to discover about yourself? Because once you see it, once you realize the strength their betrayal unlocked in you, they lose, making them regret it. The quiet revenge of rising above. Revenge. Now there's a word that tastes sharp on the tongue, doesn't it? But let me let you in on a little secret. The kind of revenge they fear most isn't loud. It's not screaming, or shouting, or trying to even the score. Nah, that's what they expect. What they want. The revenge keeps them up at night. It's quiet. It's subtle. It's watching you rise higher than they ever dreamed, while they choke on their own regrets. Imagine it's the seeds of their betrayal, the lies, the cruelty, the hurt growing into a forest so dark, so impenetrable. They'll lose their way if they ever dare to find you again. You're untouchable, unreachable, a force of nature, thriving in the shadow of their failure to destroy you. Living well isn't just about finding happiness. No, it's about becoming something more. Someone so focused, so powerful that their memory becomes insignificant. Let their actions fade into the background noise of your success. Think about it. Every time you rise, every time you laugh, achieve, or even just breathe without their shadow looming over you, it's a victory. It's proof that they lost, that their cruelty wasn't enough to hold you down. Don't do it for them. Do it for you. Focus on your growth, your journey. They don't deserve another second of your time. You've already given them enough, haven't you? Take that pain and use it. Shape it. Forge it into something unstoppable. Build a life so filling, so undeniably yours, that the echoes of their betrayal can't touch it. And when they look back, wondering if you're still caught in their web, they'll see nothing but the shadow of what you've become: stronger, wiser, untouchable. So tell me, how will you rise? How will you turn their cruelty into your masterpiece? Funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't just break things, it uncovers them. Like a flashlight cutting through the dark, it shows you things you were too blind, or maybe too kind to see before. Their actions didn't reveal your flaws. They revealed theirs, their insecurities, their weakness, their inability to handle the light you bring to the world. The knife they used wasn't about you. It was about them trying to carve out a piece of what they couldn't have. You see, betrayal has a way of pulling back the curtain. Suddenly, you see who's really there for you, who's clapping for you, and who's just waiting for you to fall. At those moments of pain, they force you to take a hard look at the people around you. Think about it. Who was there when you stumbled? Who reached out when you were down? And who vanished? The hurt draws lines in the sand. It separates the real from the fake, the loyal from the opportunistic. Betrayal stings, but it also purifies. It cleanses your circle. Because once someone shows you who they are, there's no going back, no pretending, no second guessing. And let's not forget what it teaches about you. You've seen your own strength. You've learned what you'll tolerate and what you won't. You've discovered the boundaries you never knew you needed. So ask yourself, what has the hurt revealed? Who stood by you in your darkest moments? What truths have been uncovered in the ashes of their betrayal? Pain is a cruel teacher, but it's effective. It forces you to see the world for what it is, not what you wish it could be. And that's where real power begins. Now take a moment. Reflect. What has this darkness taught you? And how will you use it to light your way forward? Let's be honest for a second, shall we? Pain is the only honest currency left in this world. People will trade their masks for a second just to show you their true selves when you're hurting. It's raw. It's real. And if you're smart, you'll learn to spend it wisely. Stop running from your pain. Stop hiding it like it's something to be ashamed of. Nah, it's not your shame to carry, it's your story to tell. Every scar, every heartbreak, every betrayal, that's your proof of life, your badge of survival. Here's the twisted beauty of it. When you own your pain, it stops owning you. The moment you say, yeah, it happened, yeah, it hurt, and yeah, I'm still standing, you take away their power. You take back control, but you've got to stop pretending it didn't happen. Stop shoving it down, painting a fake smile, and calling it strength. Real strength isn't pretending you're unscathed. It's standing tall, battle-worn and bruised, and saying, this is me. Take it or leave it. And let me tell you something. When you embrace your darkness, when you wear it like armor instead of dragging it like chains, people notice. They see someone who's unbreakable, untouchable. Someone who turned their hurt into a weapon, sharp and precise. Now think about this. How have your darkest moments shaped you? What have they taught you? How have they made you stronger, sharper, wiser? Here's the challenge. Look at your pain, not as a weakness, but as your greatest asset. Let it fuel you, drive you, push you further than you ever thought possible. Because if there's one thing pain can't do, it stops someone who's embraced it. So here you are, standing where they never thought you'd stand. You were hurt, yes, they left their marks, their scars, their shadows. But look at you now, you're not broken. You're untouchable. Their cruelty, that's your crown now. Every tear they caused, every crack in your heart, it didn't weaken you. It made you unstoppable. And now you wear scars like armor, not to hide the pain, but to show the world what it takes to stand against someone like you. Let me remind you of something dark, but true in this world. Kindness is too often mistaken for weakness. People prey on those they think won't fight back. But the weak, oh, they rise. And when they do, they remind the world who's truly strong. So take everything they gave you, the pain, the scars, the silence, and let it fuel a version of you they can never destroy. Use it to build a life they'll envy, a strength they'll fear, and a legacy they'll never escape. Now it's your turn. Don't just let this end here. Subscribe if you're ready to own your darkness, to turn their shadows into your strength. This is your story now. Let's make it unforgettable.